Ta-da! Back from the dead once more. I feel like I'm just constantly coming back from the dead. Like Doctor Who, or perhaps some sort of Marvel character. It's always the way, isn't it? It's always the way, isn't it? Righto. Well, it's been a minute. What am I talking about? What am I doing here? Movies, that's what I thought. Thought I'd talk about some movies. There's a bunch of movies coming out that I'm like interested in. One thing I thought I'd do though, we're going to take it to the next level, and we're going to no, we're not doing nothing. We're not taking anything to the next level. Just like, yeah, well, just before we do that, we're just going to open up a Kinder Surprise with a chainsaw. You know. So yeah. Anyway, lots of different movies and things coming out this year. Being that this year is the year 2024, depending on when you watch this video. This could be like some random person in the future finds this. This is one of the only snippets of the internet that they can find. And they're like, oh, you know what? There's this random white guy who's wearing like sunglasses on YouTube, and he's talking about like pop culture. It was really original, so I thought I'd better check it out. You know. So, one of the movies I was randomly thinking of, I've been like waiting for it for a long time, was the next Mad Max movie. And that movie in particular happens to be the spin-off prequel, because they're now making it their own MCU, the Max Cinematic Universe, or the WCU, the Wasteland Cinematic Unit, whatever you want to call it. The thing is that I'm really interested to see that movie. I'm also really I think people are like really dubious of it, as I always get with prequels. I'm always really dubious about like how good a prequel movie can really be, because they tend to just sort of, oh, give me a second. There was something I was going to do, and I'm going to do it now. We're going to say goodbye to Jay Darklighter. That's something we're going to do. Or at least, not the name entirely, but at least as far as the social nomenclature of it, you know. So from now on, you shall know me as Jay Darklighter. Get it? You look like, oh, he's going to say who he is. Nah. I'm a mystery, just like Batman. I always keep looking over to the screen. It's like the camera's like nowhere near that. And so it's just like, it's funny. I always want to go look there for like the camera, but it's just like, yeah, like I'm always dubious about prequels, right? And you know me, you know how I am about prequels, you know. I'm really dubious about them. That's what I always say. I'm Jay Dubious Darklighter. That's what the people say about me. Yeah, this guy over here, Captain Dubious, Detective Dubious. All right, I've used up my quota of the word dubious now. Mad Max, the prequel spin-off thing, Furiosa. I'm kind of excited to see it just because it's made by the same guy, George Miller. It's written and directed by him, right? So it's as good as like one of those things could get. So I'm going to be one of those radio people now who has to like hold the mic, like, yeah, I'm Howard Stern. Yeah, hey there, hey now. Ooh. What is it? Baba Booey. Yeah, like it's because it's the same guy doing that movie. I would be, you know, who's done all of them. It's like, okay, it's as good as it's going to be. That's basically the argument, right? Is that movie's going to be as good as it can be. But how good will it be? Because it is a prequel, and the main character is a character that's from the movie that it's spinning off of. So that character lives, you know, so that character immediately has plot immunity. So there's no dramatic tension, you know, for if that character lives or dies. And now, retroactively, when you go back and watch, like, Fury Road, you could probably maybe think, like, oh, yeah, she's going to live. But, like, you never know. Like, when you first watch that movie, you got no idea. Especially in a Mad Max movie, they'll fucking kill off anyone. You know, except for Max. He's the one through line. But everyone else could be gone. And because it's because Fury Road is the most chronologically current, it's like it takes place after the previous movie. It's like, well, who knows who lives or dies? Maybe Mad Max does die, because this one also seems to be putting a lot of attention to this female character, Furiosa, and then now there's a spin-off which puts a lot of fucking attention to her. But the difference that I'm getting at is that, like, yeah, that movie has, like, no, there's going to be no drama for, like, that character, because you also know she loses her arm. Like, she's missing an arm in that original movie, so you know that at some point, you know, like, that's the other thing. If you have, like, a movie with a character where they're, like, missing an arm, and then you do a prequel, it's kind of just like an unwritten rule that, like, that prequel's obviously going to showcase that person losing that arm. Which it does seem to happen, because she does seem to start off with it, and she loses it at some point. They don't seem to really try show that moment at all, from what I can understand. Like, in the trailer, they don't seem to try and even tiptoe around it. Like, they're obviously saving that for, you know, the film itself. It might be quite a, you know, they might actually, I mean, it is a dramatic thing, losing an arm, but they might make it a big thing in the movie. You know, they might quite make a scene out of it that it's, oh, fuck, and how she reacts to that. You know, she might just pick herself up and, oh, well, I can tie it off and keep moving forwards. Or it might be quite shocking, you know, for her, like, which it would be. It's natural for that to be like that. But you know what people in movies are like, in zombie movies. Oh, I got bit on the arm. Luckily it was down, you know, luckily it was up here. And, you know, then they just chop it off and then cauterize the wound, ties, you know, put a fucking rag on the end of it, and you're all good to fire single-handedly still, you know. Or you can aim on your nub and go with that. That's an actual sound effect, by the way. That's a licensed sound effect from the US Army. It's top secret. And so, yeah, like, you clearly have to show that event. But there's also the main bad guy from Fury Road, who's a bad guy in this, but he doesn't seem to be, like, the bad guy. In this movie, it's sort of, because that's another thing. You know he lives as well. So there's, like, a few characters in this movie that you know live, just because they're in the, you know, the movie that, they're in a movie that takes place after it, which is Fury Road. And then granted, like I say, there are these sort of steps that they might have to go through to become how they look in Fury Road, but they're still in it, you know, like, she's got to lose an arm, she's got to shave off her hair, get a little bit older, and bam, she's Charlize Theron. But she lives, you know what I mean? She survives Fury Road, and she's at the start of it as well, so it's like, well, she's got to survive the Furiosa prequel movie so she can get to Fury Road. So there's, like, no drama for, like, what happens to those characters. And that's another thing, though, is that bad guy in Morton Joe, the bad guy from Fury Road, he's got, like, a mask that he's wearing the whole time to sort of help him breathe. And I get the impression that he already seems to have that in this prequel. So it's not like, I thought before the trailer footage and stuff started to come out, I thought we might see him get that mask, maybe. I thought maybe the Chris Hemsworth character might potentially injure him and, like, make him need the mask. And then whether a Morton Joe or someone else does it, like Furiosa, like, kills Dementus. And that was another interesting thing as well, was the addition of Dementus, because he's a character that's showing up in the kind of the universe of Mad Max before, in name only, but still in name. And they called him Dr. D, Dr. Dementus, who's meant to apparently be the same guy. And he shows that you hear about him in the Mad Max video game, which takes place, like, once again, it takes place before Fury Road. Everything does. But it's like right before it, or like maybe a couple of months, depending on, it's probably either like a couple of days or a couple of months. Like, it's somewhere within that. It basically depends on probably what kind of hair you have Max, what he has when you finish the game. Like, does he have the short, regular sort of cut hair, or does he have the long hair that he has at the start of Fury Road? Because if you finish the game with the long hair, then you could sort of think in your head, okay, well, this must lead straight into Fury Road. A lot more the way that the Star Wars movie Rogue One sort of slipped straight into it. So, yeah. It's interesting, just like this sort of stuff. There's all these things that have to be, all these plates that you got to spin in the air in order to do a prequel. And that's sort of is it the catch-22? Whatever the word I'm looking for is. It's like the, like, the more disconnected you make the prequel from the original, it is technically still a prequel, but the less it really is a prequel, and the more it sort of is just its own movie. Because like those not that it's apparently going to be any good, but there's a Star Wars prequel TV show coming out called The Acolyte, and it's set, I think, like 100 years before the prequel movies of Star Wars. So pretty much, like, there's no one in what do you call it, who in the prequel trilogies who's alive, except for like Yoda, who is, I think, like 800 and something when he dies. So like, you know, there's only like 17, 18 years between the end of the prequel trilogy and the beginning of the original trilogy, and there's only like a handful of years that I think the original trilogy takes place across, and then the prequel trilogy probably has a little bit more, maybe another, there's probably, I'm not sure how long actually a span of time it happens across the prequel trilogy. It's definitely got to be more than the original trilogy though, because Anakin Skywalker's like 10 or some shit, and like, and what do you call it, in bloody Phantom Menace, and then he's like clearly like a sort of a consenting adult age in Star Wars Episode 2. Like, he's not like a child in that. He could be like, I don't know how old Padme's meant to be in that movie, because she's sort of like a teenager-y kind of person in Phantom Menace. So he's got to be at least 18, I would figure, in Episode 2, and then he's somewhere in his 20s, early to mid-20s, I would figure, somewhere about that, and at least by the time you get to the third one, Revenge of the Sith. So where am I going with this? Yeah, it's like, so theoretically though, so this prequel TV show that's set 100 years earlier, called The Acolyte, apparently it looks like it's going to be rubbish, but the idea though that it theoretically doesn't really have anything to do with the prequels, like in terms of passing the torch over sort of way that a lot of prequels do. Like Rogue One, the best example of a prequel, because it had nothing to do with the main characters of the movie that it was leading into. So that way you could have dramatic freedom, and that's kind of the secret. And that's sort of the, I feel, the failings of, like, dramatically of this Furiosa prequel, is that as good as it can be, the majority of characters, you know what becomes of them. And then there's a few characters spattered around the place that are obviously, you know, not in Fury Road, and then maybe they leave and go somewhere else. But then why? You know, because all you're doing is not killing them off. They probably die, you know, but even if you don't kill them and you just leave that and you let them live to go disappear somewhere else, why are you kind of doing that? You're just doing it so you didn't kill them. And then also, are you actually then going to somehow follow their adventures off in that sort of, you know, oh, they didn't hang around to sort of keep going down the Fury Road. They sort of went that way. But are we going that way with them? Like, not really, because Furiosa's the character that we're following, and we know that she leads back to the Fury Road movie. So, yeah, it's just very sort of, what's the point, you know? But, like, of all the prequels to do, like, it'll be, because it's George Miller writing and directing it, it'll be good. But it's just like, yeah, you know, what's going on? Why do we really need to see this? But in terms of why do we need to see this, it'll probably be some of the best looking why do we need to see this that we've ever seen, you know. So I'll wait and see, you know. I'm sure I'll like it. I don't think I'll like it more than Fury Road. I feel like Fury Road will ultimately be just a tighter film. Not that it's like Furiosa isn't made as good. I feel just the overall story and everything will be tighter and just more like. But this is the other thing, that the point of difference that we're probably going to have to get used to, and this is sort of the Star Wars prequel trilogy thing, where before the prequel trilogy of Star Wars was like a certain thing. When you went to watch one of those original 3 movies, there were certain boxes that those movies ticked. You didn't know that it was going to tick those boxes until you went in to see it, but then when you liked it, you're like, oh, it did that thing, and it did that thing there, and that thing, and that thing, and that thing over there, and it did that thing, and that thing, and that thing. Oh, and that thing too. And then we went to see the prequel trilogies, it did all these other things, and they were cool in their own way, but people were so in their mind of like, no, it has to be A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It has to hit all those specific notes in order for it to be like a Star Wars movie that I can like. And then people sort of left that as that. And then when the Disney movies eventually came along, people were like, oh, well, you know what? Maybe those prequel movies weren't so bad. We were too harsh because Star Wars was so good that we kind of got this really anal, and I'm not meaning like anal bad, but we did, like, we, like, a bunch of people will, and I'm not saying I couldn't do it. I didn't do this with Star Wars, but I've potentially done this with other intellectual properties, where I've gone, oh, the original stuff amazing, now shit, you know. I don't feel like I've done that with Marvel. I feel like Marvel actually is shit now, and same with Star Wars. Like, Star Wars is shit now, you know, with the sequel trilogy and all that stuff. But like, except for Rogue One, and like maybe the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian. And even then, certain episodes are better than others. Basically, just get the Bill Burr episode, the second Bill Burr episode. But yeah, like the what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, like the prequel trilogy though, people went back and sort of like, oh, maybe we're too harsh. So that's happened a bunch of times, like with Indiana Jones 4. That's another thing. Weirdly, when the 4th movie of something comes out, people have been critical of it because it's been a while since the original trilogy that might have got made, and then they're like, oh, no, not as good. And then the 5th one comes out. They're like, oh, they're doing a 5th one now. Remember, there's only 3, and now they've done like another 2, and then the 5th one will come out, and it's suddenly really shit. And I feel like that's what Terminator, Die Hard, and Indiana Jones, funny enough, all within a spectrum of years, of a couple of years, those franchises kind of like went back to the well. Terminator not as much, because it hadn't been as big of a gap. Like, it was only 6 years after Terminator 3 that Terminator 4 came out. So it hadn't had that big... The bigger gap was between Terminator 2 and 3, which was like 12 years. It was like 91 was Terminator 2, and then T3 was 2003. I was pretty sure it was 03. There's got to be some advertising somewhere that someone did for like T3, 2003, you know? Like lining up the number. Oh, fuck. That's gone down the wrong way. It went down my bum hole. It's going to come out my bum hole instead of my wee-wee hole. You ever do that? Like, you have food come out your pee-pee hole, and sometimes you have wheeze come out your bum hole? Does that happen to anyone? Or is that just me? Maybe it's just me. I don't know. Just different. From New Zealand, you know, different. And, yeah, so like that, you know, those movies, though, they all sort of hit the similar thing where the 4th movie got like a bunch of shit. The 3rd movie of Terminator got a bit of shit, though, as well. So Terminator's not exactly the same in those. But it does have a similar thing, though, in the sense of the 4th one kind of got a certain feeling, you know, a certain overall review that most people seem to, you know, within a certain spectrum of like hate, you know, sort of hate it or sort of like it. But there was no one that seemed to be outright loving the 4th one. I liked bits and pieces of it at the time when it came out. But there was like, you know, I feel like the ending of it, sort of that last act, was where it sort of started to falter. I think there just should have been more Terminators. They just sort of had only like 1 or 2 that everyone was fighting, and it was like, okay, like that's like one of the original movies, though. We're in the future war now. Like, let's make it a little bit more, you know, open it up a bit. Like, let's have like, and they're in a factory that's producing Terminators, so it's like, hello, like, let's have like a bunch of them like walking around, you know, even just half a dozen of them, just so that way it's more than just, you know, even if you had 2 simultaneously kind of like fighting, you know, like John Connor, that's more, because any other time you've seen Terminators attack someone, it's always like the one bad one and a one good one. So it's like, well, what if you had like a few bad ones? Terminator 3 didn't really do that. Like, it sort of had a moments with that, because it had the bad Terminator in that one, who looks like a woman, but really she's not actually, you know, it's just a robot, so it's not really a woman. Whatchamacallit, could like control other machines, you know, like with nano machines or some shit that it could inject into them. So it could kind of commandeer some other things, but they weren't other Terminators, though, necessarily, you know. Although it could capture a term, but it wasn't like there were others, because they were in the past, you know, so it wasn't like there was other Terminators just on its side. So, yeah, like it was interesting how like the 4th one came out, and then people had their own feelings of it as well. And then the 5th Terminator came out, and that really shit the bed. Like, people, and then the 6th one shit the bed as well, but like the 5th one really shit the bed, and people were just like, oh, good God, no. And another random little weird fact, right, is so Die Hard 4 and Indiana Jones 4 that I mentioned also had the same thing. If the 4th one of each of those came out, people felt a certain way about them that were like, oh, they just didn't live up to some degree or another. They didn't live up to the original 3. But then the 5th one would come out sometime later. For Die Hard, it was only like Die Hard 4 is 07. Die Hard 5 is 2013. So that's 6 years later. So that's another like sort of Terminator 3 to 4 sort of age gap. It's not a huge amount of time, really, It can be a little while compared to some franchises, where they really spit them out one after the other. Like the third, Die Hard 2 came out 2 years after the first one. But then the third one came out 5 years after the second one. So that's a little bit of gap, But then things like the Spider-Man movies, they all, like each of those Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, or Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, they all come out in either like a 2 or 3 year gap from each other. So they really crank those movies out. Like within a few years, you've suddenly got a trilogy. Whereas, some of these other trilogies take time. Like Indiana Jones 1 came out in 81. The second one was 84. But then the third one was 89. But then the fourth one is the one that really, took a while, which was 2008. So it was 19 years after the third one. So that's probably going to be the biggest gap of... That's probably going to be, in terms of Rambo or any of that sort of stuff, it's probably going to be the biggest gap, potentially, I think. Although Rambo might just beat it, I think. I think Rambo might be a 20-year gap, because the fourth Rambo movie came out in 08, I'm pretty sure. And then I think Rambo 3 was like 88. So that would be 20 years. So it would be it'd have that record just a little bit long. And then Indiana Jones would be in second place for the next longest, probably, time before getting to another movie in a franchise. There might be some other random thing where they did a sequel to a movie donkeys later, but I'm talking like a franchise where it was already going, so it's not just like, oh, it was a standalone movie and then they did a sequel that much later. No, I'm talking about there was like 2 or 3 of them already, or it's a franchise already, and then they left it for a while. And that's what like Indiana Jones and Rambo had happened to them, like a gap of 19 and 20 years, as I said. And so, The interesting thing about Indiana Jones, though, was the 5th one is definitely going to be the worst, I think, reviewed out of all probably the 5th ones of those movies. And Terminator Genisys, the 5th one, that's a dog shit movie. And it's funny, as much as people love Terminator, I don't know if maybe it's because Terminator had already sort of started to fall by the wayside for people, though, as well, because Terminator 3 wasn't really sort of everyone's cup of tea, and then neither was Terminator 4, but they had bits and pieces about them that were sort of still in the spirit of the original 2, like they hadn't totally sort of, jumped the shark or spat the dummy or shit the bed or whatever metaphor you want to use, but they were getting there, but they weren't like, once you look back on them, you're like, oh, they really weren't that bad, we were just being super critical. But then the 5th one came along, and that was like, it wasn't just the final nail in the coffin. I feel like that was multiple. It was the final nail in the coffin, but also probably the other 17 nails prior to that. I don't know how many nails you put in a coffin. Like, fuck, is this guy going to get back out of the coffin? Like, is he a zombie? Like, maybe we should just like shoot him in the head. If we really think he's going to get back up, maybe we should just like stab him and shoot him in the head before we bury this guy. Because like I'm wasting a lot of nails on this one coffin. We've got a lot of bodies to bury, and this one guy, I've used up a whole jar of nails just on this guy. And, just multiple nails, it was like all at once. Whereas Indiana Jones, people gave kind of the 4th one crap. But then, as I said, they went and looked back on it and were like, oh, not so bad. But it was only that 4th one that had sort of, that had disappointed people. You know what I mean? Prior to that, there really wasn't any, Indiana Jones disappointment. And even then, the amount of disappointment was still like, oh, we'll go see another one. Like, people hadn't written off Indiana Jones. People have now, written off Indiana Jones because of the 5th one. People have now written off Star Wars because of the sequel trilogy. People have now written off Terminator because of the 5th and the 6th one. Those movies have definitively, killed a lot of people's interest, where they otherwise might have been, oh, the last one wasn't great, but I like that, but I'll go see the next one. There was still, they still, would, throw that DVD in their shopping trolley, so to speak. They weren't totally signed out of it. Whereas now, Terminator, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, there's a bunch of franchises that have just locked out. Rambo had a 5th one, which I don't think apparently was that great, but it doesn't seem to be as shit as all the other franchises' fifth movies. It looks like the fourth one is still a lot better, but it's not like it let down the team the way that those other franchises' respective fifth movie in the series did. So, yeah, just interesting. Nerd waffles, doing some nerd waffling. So yeah, I don't know, but like, and this is the funny thing as well, is that this Mad Max prequel spin-off thing called Furiosa, it's the fifth movie. But also it's like, it's a spin-off prequel, so it's funny that it is the fifth movie though. Like, it's like, oh, well, you know, there's a certain sort of luck of the draw with that fifth movie, but it's a spin-off, so it's got that different thing to it as well, you know. And that's what, like, another thing that Die Hard had, that people sort of, I think, tried to like the fifth movie, was that the fourth one was made PG-13, whereas Die Hard was always an R-rated franchise. But then the fourth one was PG-13, and then the fifth one was R-rated again. So there was this sort of like, like before the fifth one came out, there was this kind of like, when you heard that it was going to be R-rated, like, oh, finally, cool, finally, awesome, right, hope this one should be good, you know? And then it still was just pretty lackluster. There's bits and pieces of that fifth one that I like, but overall I like the fourth one more. I think really what I probably like about the fifth Die Hard, if I'm being honest though, it's really just how some of the action scenes are shot. Because the guy that directed that movie is a guy called John Moore, who directed the early 2000s action movie Behind Enemy Lines with Owen Wilson as a shot down US Air Force pilot in like Bosnia, Serbia, that sort of place. One of those fucking places. And he like that way that movie was shot was really good. And Die Hard 5, what's called a Good Day to Die Hard, it had a little bit of that in it, of that sort of style. And so there were bits and pieces like this, you know, there was this big armoured APC chase through like the streets of Moscow near the beginning of the movie that was really well done. And then the end scene in like Chernobyl, where there's sort of a helicopter going into a building and some stuff like that and around it. Some of that stuff was interesting and the way it was done, but most of it was just dog shit. And they're like the character stuff in it just felt real sort of macho-y bullshit, two-dimensional kind of stuff. It didn't really feel like the vulnerability of John McClane that we'd seen in the past. It suddenly felt like John McClane trying to play some two-dimensional guy who doesn't talk about his emotions sort of person. Like, I get that he's a human being and he's a guy from a certain time and he just doesn't just open up about his feelings to everyone, but he's like a vulnerable, raw sort of exposed nerve. That's sort of who John McClane was. He's just a regular guy, you know? And like he does have his son in that movie, and it's like they didn't try and find, they made it very I felt artificial in that fifth one, the character stuff. So it don't see a lot of luck with the fifth movies in the series, you know. And what was I gonna say? But yeah, that's, you know, Mad Max Furiosa. That's what we're getting at. Back to that. All the way full circle. All the way back round. But then there's also like Deadpool and Wolverine, which supposedly isn't Deadpool 3. And it's like, do you really think after Deadpool and Wolverine that they're going to do a separate movie called Deadpool 3? Like, that would be fun. I would love to see that, but I don't get the impression they're going to do that. I sort of think they're... Not that they won't have Deadpool at all, but I feel like another movie will be called Deadpool something or other. I don't get the impression that it'll be, you know... I don't think you'll ever see the... I don't think you'll ever really see the third movie that would have come after Deadpool 2 if 20th Century Fox was still making these movies without Disney ownership over top of them, you know? So... I think that's gone, you know. I think that's long gone, basically. I think it was about 2017, 2018, or somewhere around there when Disney bought Fox. Because when they started making Deadpool 2, I'm pretty sure it was like 20th Century Fox that made it. But then you get to like, what do you call it? By the time Deadpool 2 comes out, it's, what do you call it? It's already like Disney. Because suddenly the advertising, I remember, started trying to make little jokes about Disney or something like that. You could tell, like, you could just feel the tilt. So it wasn't quite a, a proper release. But then you get to like where we are now. There you go. And we're in a very different place now. Yeah, so. Pardon me. So, Deadpool and Wolverine, I think basically, that's a whole new film. I don't think you're going to see that. Nah. You're not going to see that, like, you'll see that movie. Sorry, I'm not. You'll know you'll never see it. They won't release it to the movies. No, I'm getting at like what am I saying? Fuck. Yeah, you won't see that like original third movie. That's gone. Like this might have some components in it, but it's definitely not the same film. But I do sort of weirdly feel though that like at the same time that you can kind of bullshit your way into saying that like this movie is the Deadpool, the movie that they were expecting, because there is elements, and I think the reason why though is because they've smartly gone, okay, where was that last movie? Like what direction was the arrow pointing in? Whereas a lot of the time when that sort of change happens, they sort of just silently reboot. They either strong reboot it, or they sort of do like a they're still carrying on in continuity. But they basically like don't act as if they don't really mention the previous events. Funny enough, I'll go back to Die Hard 2. Not that it really rebooted it, but like after Die Hard 2, no one ever mentions Die Hard 2. Like Die Hard 1 gets referenced, but no one ever references Die Hard 2. To be fair, like no one ever really references Die Hard 3 and Die Hard or 4 in the movies after those. But like specifically, like, I know that Die Hard 2 doesn't get referenced. Like, in Die Hard 3, they reference Die Hard 1, and nothing about Die Hard 2 is referenced. So it's like, there's clearly something there. And so that event can still have taken place, but they just don't mention it. And I reckon that's what we might sort of, we're in a sort of a version of that, I think, where some things will be mentioned and we will carry on, and they'll get, yeah, remember that thing we were talking about? And then other things just won't be there. Like, for example, his friend, the guy who owns the bar, he's just not there. But they probably won't, they might make some joke about that potentially, like, just because Deadpool's a comedy thing and they do stuff like that, but I wouldn't be surprised if they just don't mention that. Yeah, I don't think they will. It'll just be a sort of I think he'll just not be there. And he'll be like, oh, where's, the classic references in Happy Days when, what's his name? Fonzie, he had like a brother for like an episode or two. And then his brother apparently just like walks upstairs. You see him like walk up the stairs in the shot or something. And then he doesn't come back down the stairs for the rest of the episode or something, or the episode ends. And that's it. He's just gone. There's no reference to him ever again. And they don't say that he doesn't have a brother. They just never show him or talk about him. And it just is what it is. So it's, I think that it's going to be one of those kind of things. Because one of the big things that they do that I think this movie is heavily leaning on is the post-credit scene at the end of Deadpool 2 where they reference the team up, where he goes, oh, like, okay, one day, like, you're gonna come team up with your old pal Wade, and it's like that. Back then, that was just sort of like a little joke that they did, sort of it aimed at Hugh Jackman, like trying to get him to sort of like, oh, whatever, just like to say that Deadpool loves Wolverine or something, but like, it didn't seem like they actually had an exact movie with Wolverine set up as the next one. Like that probably wasn't going to be the thing. The next movie was probably, I got the impression that the next movie was probably going to more have something to do with Cable to some degree. But now that's the other thing, is that Cable just isn't there. But he was there in the second one, and he decided to hang around. And so it's like, well, shouldn't he be there? Or to some degree be around. So it'll be interesting if they do bring him, if they bring him in, because if nothing's been mentioned about Josh Brolin as Cable. And originally he was, back when they originally did that Deadpool 2 movie, there was going to be in like a few movies as Cable. It was the idea that there was going to be like 3, 4, maybe 5 movies that he would show up in. Deadpool 2 being the first one. Oh, that reminds me. That's why I was going to mention Mad Max before. But not the only reason. So, being that it's a prequel and it's set, it's set across a number of years, but being that a good chunk of it is sort of following this particular actress who plays like the younger version of the character, but while she's still, of a young adult age. Whatever that actress, Anya Taylor-Joy, that's it. Whatever she's called. She, like that sort of time period where she's that the characters of that age. It's about 15 years apparently before Fury Road. So the difference being that Mad Max is obviously still out there, on his own journey at that moment. He hasn't come to be in that place and time exactly yet, but he apparently does cameo in this movie, so he's around. So I don't know if for the next 15 years, he's just driving around this sort of same, few different bases or outposts, the place where she's at, and then the Bullet Town, and then the gas spot. Is he just driving around those places for the next 15 years, or does he like leave entirely and then come back? Like maybe he does. But I thought like the smart thing to do, right, if you are going to have him show up, because I thought if you are going to do a spin-off prequel, I would have thought the better thing to do would just be not have him be in it, and just be like, just don't have him be in it. If you are going to do a spin-off with another character, make it about that character. Actually make it about that character. Like, don't immediately just bring in the original guy immediately. I thought that was sort of like what the reason he was in Fury Road, right, was that sort of like they were trying to make a movie with her, but it's always got to be a Mad Max movie, and it's like, well, now you've sort of made it like a Furiosa movie, but with barely really with any Mad Max in it. And I thought, like, if you were going to cameo him though, like in like a quick little scene or something in that film, actually be smart about it, which they may or may not. I'm not sure. They might have just really stupidly added him in just for the sake of it, but without really making that great of a reason. But I thought the great reason, right, would be this. So at the beginning of that Fury Road movie, he has that car from like the original movies that got like destroyed in the second movie, and then he didn't have that in the third movie. But Furiosa, the Fury Road movie, he has it back again, and you're like, well, that was one of the plot holes that I remember a bunch of people talking about, like, where does he get that? Who knew that series? They're like, where does he get the car from again? Is it the exact same one? Does he find like another one of the same? Like what's that about? And I thought, if you're gonna cameo him, do that. Have him that like maybe he just earned the car back. Maybe he's gone through a whole adventure, and and when we see him, that's him like just getting it back. And like that sort of, there could be a whole other movie of Mad Max where someone takes his car or something or does whatever, and then he has to earn his way back to getting it, and then that scene that you see in Furiosa could be the scene of him getting it back, like, and that would be all you need to see of him. And I feel like that would be a smart way to like do that. But I'd be very surprised if they actually do that. I'll take my hat off to them. And if I'm not wearing a hat, it means I'll probably have to shave in order to make that be true, because it's like, well, you don't have a hat on, and it's like, yeah, but I said I'd take my hat off. It's like, yeah, but you don't have a hat on. I'm like, yeah, so I just don't do anything. No, you got to shave. You got to shave your hair off, mate. You got to, you made a promise. So, yeah, it's very interesting. But yeah, that anyway. So that was what I was going to say that earlier. But like back to Deadpool and Wolverine, I think that movie's basically just going to carry on from that post-credits sort of thing where it was all like Deadpool goes back and visits Wolverine. I think it'll just sort of carry on from that, what that stuff was getting at. It'll just be about that. And all of that sort of Cable, Josh Brolin sort of stuff, X-Force stuff that they were setting up in Deadpool 2, like that's not happening at all. Like, that's totally gone now, I think. And I think if they do that X-Force thing at some point, which I'm sure they will, because I'm sure they would love to, they're doing a movie called Thunderbolts, which is like another group, like the Avengers or the Defenders. So they did 4 Avengers movies. They did a Netflix TV show called The Defenders, and then there's the Guardians of the Galaxy, and then now there's a movie coming out called The Thunderbolts. So there's like, they love their group movies, and so of course they're going to do like another, you know, they're not going to turn down a chance to do a group movie. So I'm sure X-Force will be a thing they do at some point, but it won't be the kind of the Deadpool 2 thing that we thought it was going to be. But yeah, so it's interesting. I think that movie will be pretty good though, but it isn't going to save Disney the way that I think some people, like Disney, probably wants it to. It'll just be one of those random, like, sort of Guardians of the Galaxy 3 kind of movies where every other thing around it is shit and gets reviewed really shit, but then there's randomly that one thing that's kind of made within this rare exception because it was like James Gunn or Chris Pratt making it, or with Deadpool you've got Ryan Reynolds who has sort of enough star power to be able to say, okay, if I'm going to do a thing, he's got enough star power to be able to kind of protect it and make sure it's not too shit. And maybe they try to slap a little bit of shit onto it, like, oh, we're going to make sure there's some shit stuff there because we're Disney and we're retarded. Like, but you know, I don't think it'll be that bad. And same with like Hugh Jackman being in it as well, because there's those two people making it. It's like, I'm pretty sure it'll just be like a regular superhero movie that we remember from the past. We're like, oh, it didn't have all that other bullshit attached to it. It was just like a fun movie. So yeah, I think we'll probably get something good out of that, but that'll be it, you know. And then it'll be interesting to see after that though, because they've obviously melded Deadpool into Disney now, like with this movie. Moving on from this movie, it'll be interesting to see how Deadpool gets used. You know, like, does Ryan Reynolds still keep to get making his own movies and he still has sort of control over them and Disney aren't fucking it up too much? Or is it like, oh, no, now, okay, so we got the Deadpool and Wolverine one, that was good, but then the fourth one is like really shit. You know, because now Disney's really brought their big fucking political boot down or something on it, you know, and made it all the way they want to, like rubbish. So, yeah. I think it'll, this movie could be interesting, but the future of it I'm very uncertain on. And it's interesting though, because like, yeah, it's just, it feels like with that movie, and then also that last Spider-Man movie that came out, they're bringing back like all these different people and all these universes and things that like were, same with they did it with, it's not Marvel, what's the other one? DC. They did it with what was it, The Flash? That was the one. The Flash movie where they brought in like Batmans and Supermans and stuff from like previous movies, like they were in different like timelines. You know, and you thought like, okay, yeah, they're just standalone movies and we'll never go back to those because they exist in their own thing. And then when they sort of opened up the multiverse, that one of the cool things that all of these people did when they've said, oh, we're going to do the multiverse, which they all seem to be doing at the same time, all just copying each other, is that they like they didn't just start hiring new actors to play new versions of these characters. They actually did, the first thing that they did was they went like back to the well. You know, they decided to go like basically like, hey, what if we just like get that guy because he was already that person, and we get him to like just come back and we'll make that like, oh yeah, that's like timeline 1, and then that other guy's timeline 2 or whatever. And so eventually they're going to like hire new people, but at the moment it's like they've sort of just used those previous movies and said that by bringing those characters into the new movie, they've sort of just said, oh hey, like, you know, those are other universes, but they've sort of gone with that nostalgia touch to start with. But at some point they're eventually going to start, you know, showing, because some of the characters they haven't even shown, or there's probably a bunch of characters really they haven't shown other versions of. Like, you get versions of characters where they're like cast by where they're played by the same actor, but they're in another like timeline, you know, sort of thing, dimension. But then you get versions of them that are actually played by different actors. Like John Krasinski showed up as like the Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four in what was it, in Doctor Strange 2. But then there's a Fantastic Four movie coming out in the next couple of years, and it's going to have that Pedro Pascal guy as that character. So that's clearly like another timeline, and I don't know if that's in like the MCU or if that's its own. So he might be the MC, like, because the Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man that we sort of followed to start with, that's where that Doctor Strange we were following, that's where he's from. And he went to another dimension, and that's where he met that John Krasinski Fantastic Four guy. So I think Pedro Pascal is meant to be like the Fantastic Four guy of like the Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man, you know what I mean? MCU timeline. But yeah, it's interesting. So at some point though, they're going to get to like Tom Cruise Iron Man, and we're going to see those things, where they start going, well, who else could be? And things like that could have a great reveal, because you sort of have like the suit like hiding them, and then at a certain point you basically get that reveal of the mask come off, and you're like, oh, it's not Robert Downey Jr. It's and when they do that the first time, I feel like someone like Tom Cruise would be like a really fun one to make, like just for a cameo, because it's like, yeah, I feel like in another timeline or another dimension, whatever you call it, like Tom Cruise would be that Tony Stark. I could see him being a version of Tony Stark very much so. And so I'm not saying we need to see movies and a whole thing with him, but just having him be there and like, yeah, he's out there, and then you could have other people do him. I play the role. But it is interesting how they've only just sort of thinking about it now, really, how they've gone that way with it. They didn't really cast a bunch of new people to play new versions of that character, just sort of show how the multiverse works. They brought back like original, actors of those characters. And like in Spider-Man, they had two other Spider-Men, or in The Flash, they had the old Batman, and they had other Superman and all that stuff. And then they had what's his name? Zod. Yeah, Zod, the bad guy from Man of Steel. He was like in that as well. So it was really mixing previous actual actors, and it wasn't just But at some point they're going to go the all right, let's get random new different looking people. But that's the other thing as well, is that when they do that, will that be like a new movie? When they do sort of cast a new like random fresh face as an Iron Man or as a Tony Stark, is that going to be like, are they going to show up first in like a random other thing, or are they or they might show up in a random other thing and then they get their own movie, or do they just give them their own do they just set them off on their own, start off their own thing again, and then that? Because I do get a bit sick sometimes of seeing characters get sort of set up in other people's stories. And it's like, I kind of get sick. Like, Marvel's got it's a bit too over the top with that now, where each movie is sort of setting up one or two other movies as well. And it's sort of, sometimes it feels like it gets a bit too distracted doing that to actually just concentrate on its own story and just tell its own story well. There's too many other variables happening that I think have been forced in there, because it's like, yeah, you got to, Marvel, the studio, is saying like, yeah, well, that movie comes out in 2 years, so we need to let the kids know who that person is. And it's like, that's got nothing to do with this movie though. And you're like, tough shit, fuck, it does now, figure it out, or we'll fire you, we'll just get another person, and that seems to be how they do it. So I don't know. It's interesting. What I talk about Mad Max and Deadpool. That's a different movie as well. Mad Max and Deadpool. Yeah, he breaks into the Mad Max universe, and yeah, I'm not really even sure. Oh, that's the other one I was thinking of, was Alien Romulus. That's another really interesting one that I'm looking forward to this year, eh? So those are like 3 movies overall that like I'm looking forward to varying degrees. I'm like quite looking forward to them. I'm quite looking forward to seeing all 3 of those. But like Alien Romulus looks like it might be a real sort of franchise saver, because Alien is one who, as I mentioned before with like Terminator, how it didn't spit the dummy like immediately. It sort of slowly declined. Like Terminator 1 and 2 are amazing. 3 wasn't as good, and it was like, yeah, this isn't as good, but it's got parts of it and stuff that I like in it. Then 4 was sort of the same, where it was like, oh, at least they're in the future war now. They're not just repeating the robots go back in time, one to kill and one to save storyline. It was like, no, now we're actually in the future war. And then but like the 5th and 6th one shit the bed, but it was only at the end that it did. Whereas like in those last two, whereas Alien for like a while, it feels like has sort of spat the dummy now to varying degrees, because there was those two Alien versus Predator movies. There was the four original Alien movies, but then after that, the only way to see an Alien movie was those two Alien versus Predator movies. And then you had Prometheus, which was a letdown because it wasn't the kind of movie that it was advertised as. And then you had Alien Covenant, which was better than Prometheus, but it felt like it just went by too quickly. It felt like that actually should have been a TV show, which they're apparently doing a TV show of Alien now. But it's like a separate thing. I'll be back in a sec. So yeah, but like this Alien TV show, that's apparently just going to be set like on Earth or something and have like nothing to really do with the aliens or something. Or they'll probably talk about them in that. It'll be around it, but it doesn't sound like it's got to do with it, or at least to start with. I have a feeling it might be one of those things that to start with it's really distant from the alien stuff, like the way Prometheus kind of is. And then sort of in the second season or so, you might get more and more into it. The way that like Prometheus sort of, most of that Prometheus movie really has nothing to do with sort of, you know, the aliens. And then like near the end of it, bits and pieces of it start to tap into that, but you never see an actual like xenomorph in that movie. You see similar things, something close to it at the end, but nothing like that, you know. And it wasn't a horror movie either. It was like more of like a sci-fi mystery movie than anything, you know. Sort of a thriller, like more of a sci-fi mystery thriller sort of thing, whereas like the original Alien is like a is like a, you know, a catatonic, you know, horror movie. This, you know, the state of catatonic terror that it sort of induces into you, you know, like Sigourney Weaver when she's the last person alive on the ship and she's sneaking around with the flamethrower and the cat and the cat box or whatever that she's got, and she's like just, you know, just all on her own and just in those dark tunnels and all that's the alien, the ship noises are all going off and you're like, fuck me, you know, like, where is this fucking thing, you know? And then Aliens was an evolution of that where it brought in all the action stuff a bit, but it still kept that horror tone. It was just like, oh, now we're shooting at horror things with, you know, but it didn't make it an action movie. And that's what it felt like the Alien versus Predator movies did. It's like it actually turned it into action as opposed to just being like a horror universe that people were, you know, there were some action guys that showed up in it. So, what was I saying? Yeah, so like, but and the movie, the Alien movies, just felt like there was a lot more of them that just further and further detracted from what the original thing was. Like, an Alien Covenant felt like it was sort of trying to get back to that horror thing whilst also trying to be Prometheus, and I liked a lot of it. It was really interesting, and I wouldn't say Alien spat the dummy, like shat the bed in the same way, to the same degree that overall that as far as its own series is concerned, because I mentioned Alien versus Predator, but they're also kind of spin-offy separate things that, you know, if you watch Prometheus and Alien Covenant, I don't think the Alien versus Predator movies are meant to count, you know, in that, you know, you just don't regard them. You could technically, I don't think there's anything that really says they didn't happen, but they just sort of don't mention it and act as if it didn't, you know, but there's nothing that really they say that excludes them. They just sort of quietly exclude them, you know, whereas like Predator, that series, some of those movies like kind of really shit the bed. Like there was the Alien versus Predator ones, but even in their own series there was like The Predator, which was dog shit. That was a rubbish movie. But then Predators and Prey were both really good in their own way. I thought they were both really good. And what was I going to say? Yeah, but with Alien though, back to it. This movie Alien Romulus, and it's set between Alien and Aliens, which is kind of interesting. So it's meant to be a little bit of a bridge between the two, because apparently it's like it's two, like there's the old myth of like how the city of Rome was created, which was, there's a mythological story of these two brothers that were raised by wolves called Romulus and Remus. And I think Romulus killed Remus. I forget why, but it's one of those sort of stories back in the day, like in the Bible or something, where a brother kills another brother for some, stupid bloody reason. And whatchamacallit, I probably say that a lot too much, whatchamacallit, or like or whatchamacallit, just because it's like whatchamacallit. Shut up with all the like whatchamacallit, idiot. So Romulus is in the Alien Romulus movie. Apparently it's like one half of a space station, and Remus being the other half of it. And I think that's like how it is. It's somehow like a space station of two halves, and I don't know if they're like kind of two separate stations that have been linked together or something, how it works. But like Remus is like where the humans, I think, are all living, like the people that we're gonna see get killed off. They all live like on there or work on there or something, and Romulus is sort of like the other half or another space station or something, and that's where all the bad stuff basically is that comes into their station. That's how so I don't know how the aliens get to there, but somehow they do, because that's also another story unto itself of like, well, did they go to the planet with the crashed spaceship with all the alien eggs on it, and did they take like some of those away, like after Alien, and then, because also during this movie, Sigourney Weaver's essentially out in a spaceship asleep, between the event and during the events of this movie. So, and the other thing as well is, I don't know if they mention, at least in the advertising, they said it takes place between them, but like, is it like, there's a good chunk of like 90 years or something, I think, that takes place between Alien and Aliens, because she's in 90 or 150 years, something like that. Like, it's a good, like, fucking lot of time. It's enough for like a person to be born and die of old age kind of thing. And I think they've never said anything about like, that no one's mentioned that like it's going to take place right before Aliens. They just said that it's going to take place between them, but it's apparently like a standalone sort of story. Like, it's not meant to, at least from what they've said, it doesn't immediately like dovetail into Aliens. But it would be, it might connect to the two in some way, but it might not necessarily be like the Rogue One to it, where when it finishes, you could like, cut off the end credits of this movie and then cut off the opening credits of Aliens and put them like together and make like one, sort of larger thing. But this movie though looks really good, because it looks like it's been done, like made to look the way that the first two movies did. Like, they've tried to make all the computers look like those old 70s, early to mid 80s sort of computers that are meant to be sci-fi future stuff, but they're clearly like old shit, retro now. But for like then, it was like, oh yeah, we'll make this is the technology they have. And supposedly there's something about that in that movie, or something that the writer-director guy, like, I think like the Remus station has more of the alien technology, and I think the Romulus station is supposedly a bit more like it's got a bit more aliens kind of technology to it. Like he didn't even say much about what that means, but it's just interesting. It seems really cool. Like, they've really tried to go back to old school, and it's like, this is what we need, like something like Alien Romulus, I reckon, where you just really harken back to the original thing. And it doesn't mean that you can't move forwards from it in some capacity, but you sort of have to, there's something you've got to stay true to. And that's like with Star Wars, where it doesn't need to be that exact original thing, but it does have to retain certain beats or elements or things. It doesn't need to be like, every movie has to blow up a Death Star, but there's certain things to make it a Star Wars, experience or movie or whatever. Yeah, so Alien Romulus is like the other big one, where those three movies, they're sort of like, currently they're my sort of 2024 like movies that I'm actually like really interested to see. Whereas there's a bunch of other things that'll come out this year that I'll go, okay, like, yeah, right. Watch that when it comes out on download, but those are three movies that I actually, especially Mad Max, the Furiosa prequel, and also Alien Romulus, I really want to see those at the movies. And Deadpool and Wolverine I probably would go watch as well, but like what do you call it? Alien Romulus and Furiosa, those are things worth seeing at the cinema, I think, just for the experience of, scale and epicness and scope and action and stuff that the Furiosa Mad Max prequel will have. And then Alien Romulus will just be a great, if it does it right, it'll just be a great scary film, And so there's nothing like seeing a really good, well done scary film at the movies, in the darkness and that, with all the sound just booming, coming at you from everywhere. Like, is it over there? What's going on? Because I'm a sucker for that. Like, I fell for I think I saw like definitely the first two. I don't know if I saw the third. I saw the first two Paranormal Activity movies definitely at the movies. I don't know if I saw the third one there. I think I did. That's definitely the last one in that series that I saw, though. And those movies are what they are, like they're very just sort of... They're like a sort of horror movies and comedy movies. They can be a lot more than just that, but they can also just be about the scares or the laughs. And that's what Paranormal Activity felt like. It felt like it was purely and utterly only about the scares. And someone might say, oh, isn't that what a horror movie should be? It's like, but it can be more than that, and that's what brings you back to watching it again. But when a movie's only about the scares, like those boo moments, it might do them really well, and they did. Like at the movies, when I watched it, I think I watched the third one there, but I remember the first two definitely at the movies, like where the sort of boo moments that those movies would give you. I think the second one had at least a couple of them, maybe a few. The first one only had one or two. Yeah, like it, what's the word I'm looking for? It really, like, it did that well, those scares, but once you'd seen it, it was like, okay, it's done, It's like a bike helmet, it's good for one crash and that's it, you get rid of it. And so that's why I never really watched those movies. I think I tried to watch some of one again at some point, and I was like, it's just not the same. But it also wasn't at the movies, so you're kind of not watching it in the same dark sort of experience that it was, in the quote-unquote experience that you were in. But, yeah, they're very much sort of a one-shot pistol. And they did that well. What they wanted to do, they did well. But it's just a really singular experience. Whereas an Alien movie, you can go back and watch an Alien movie again and again. And sometimes because you might even, like, you're smart enough to, like, there's things going on. Like, you might pick up on things that characters do. Or you might see something before, it popped out. And you're like, oh, my God, that thing was there the whole time. I didn't see it until it went like that. But, like, you actually see it for, like, a half a minute before it, jumps out. Like, did you know it was there? Or... it was some part that was just really violent and you want to see that again, or whatever, some twist or something. They can have other things go into them. And that's what Alien, on a good day, can do. It's got everything. And so Alien Romulus looks like it's going to be one of those, hopefully one of those picture-perfect packages. And then, Furiosa and Deadpool and Wolverine bringing up the rear. I actually forget which one's even coming out first of these movies. I know, Furiosa will be probably, because that comes out in like a month from now. I think it's like May 23rd, where I am, which is Australia. Yeah, May 23rd, so that's like a month from now. And then, I think Alien Romulus is in like October, or I think August. Yeah, August 16th. Yeah, okay, here we go. Set between the events of Alien and Aliens, the story concerns a group of young space colonists who, while scavenging a derelict space station, come face to face with the most terrifying life form in the universe. So they're not even like from that. So they actually like... It's a derelict place that they actually go to and show up at. Interesting. So that's August, though. And then what was the third one? Deadpool and Wolverine. I think that actually might be May as well. May or June, something like that. July 26, okay. Okay. Interesting just reading about Deadpool, like seeing who's in it and all that stuff. It is interesting some of those X-Force people are back in it. Which is interesting to see. But then Jennifer Garner as Elektra Natchios from the Daredevil movie, the Ben Affleck one back in the day, that's a real, like... Chris Hemsworth appears as Thor through repurposed footage from Avengers Infinity War. Is that actually, though, like, the way they used footage of Hugh Jackman as Wolverine from the X-Men Origins Wolverine movie at the end of Deadpool 2, where it's not really, they haven't really filmed something new, but they're trying to add Deadpool into the scene, like as if he's travelled back in time and Hugh Jackman's sort of talking to him, but it's clearly just using the footage that they had? Or is it like, because I think he sees some of the people on the, he goes to that Time Authority place and he sees, like, they show him some of the Marvel movie events on screens. So it might just be that, it could even just be that we see him on that. But it's, yeah, July, okay. So there's sort of a good bit of time coming up, hey, where there every sort of couple of months there's going to be like a great movie. Okay. Or even a month or two. Because in May, next month there's Furiosa. 2 months after that there's Deadpool and Wolverine. And then a month after that there's Alien Romulus. So there's a lot of interesting stuff coming out this year. Like, it's actually worth, you know, checking some of those things out, I think. There'll be some good... As much shit that gets made nowadays, there's still, like, some really interesting, well-made, like... you know, crafted with like as many practical effects as possible and as much quality and storytelling talent, and just trying to make as legit a good thing as possible without it being a political, you know, tool for someone's politics bullshit. There is still stuff like that getting made, and some of it's actually getting made by like studios, you know. So, but sometimes it's because these things are sort of grandfathered in, though. At the same time, like Alien Romulus is obviously Alien's a bit of an old series, and Deadpool and Wolverine, as I mentioned, has Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman. It's obviously that's a sort of a 20-year-old, 24-year-old series at this point, the whole X-Men thing, that particular strain of the X-Men. But it's got those two actors from them who are part of the attraction in that, so it's got them sort of controlling it to some degree, producing it. And then Furiosa, the Mad Max prequel, that's obviously got the same guy, George Miller, who's written and directed all of them. So they just kind of almost let that guy do whatever he wants, you know. But if a new person showed up and tried to do that, they'd probably go, oh, I'm not sure, mate, are you know. But because that guy's like literally grandfathered in, he's sort of allowed to do whatever. So it'll be interesting to see what becomes of all of this. 2024, a year for movies. But then there's also that other thing as well about Quentin Tarantino's last movie. He was going to do that movie called The Movie Critic, and then apparently he's not going to do that now. He's going to do something different. There's only once before that he's ever kind of said that as well, and that was for The Hateful Eight. But it was different, though, for The Hateful Eight, because for that he did like a live reading, I think. I know he did do a live reading before they started filming it, with like a bunch of the actors, you know, in front of like an audience of people somewhere. And I think a bunch of people filmed it and it got out, and I don't think he wanted it filmed, and that's sort of what I think annoyed him. Or it was like the script got out or something, like it was something like that, and then he was sort of, I might not do it then, yeah. But it was because people like filmed or caught some part of it, you know, before it was finished, before the movie was out. Whereas the movie critic, like, I don't think anything, there was no script leak, there was no, you know, it wasn't like there was a reading, like the actors reading all their parts at a table and someone filmed it and got it out. Nothing like that. So I don't get why. So that's what makes me think that the reason that he said no to this one, he's changed his mind on it, is a bit more legit, because he's probably actually gone, you know what, I'm actually thinking something different. But what is the other thing that he's thinking of, though? Like, does he actually have a strong other idea that he goes, you know what, I was going to do that, but I'm going to do this instead? You know, or is it like, oh, okay, no, I was going to do this, but just now I don't know. Now just back to the drawing board. And he might have some things up in his head, but he might be back at a stage of where it'll be a few more years before his last movie comes out. Whereas the way it was going, we probably would have seen his next movie, like his last movie, like which is his next one. Like we probably would have seen that like next year, you know, maybe like the second half of next year or something, you know, sort of thing. Because most of his movies don't take ages to film. I think the longest one that it took to film was like Kill Bill, and it's obviously because it's a bit bigger, but it's, you know, longer, but it's also because there's those sword fights and all that stuff, so that took time. But, you know, other than that, it's that's sort of a future year now. Whenever the supposedly last Quentin Tarantino movie comes along, he might be getting a bit more also putting himself up against a wall now, going, okay, well, if this is going to be my 10th movie, he might be like really, really, really raising the bar on like what it's going to be, because it's like, well, if this is going to be, if he's sticking to that idea of this is going to be his last movie, it's like, well, you know, you'd want to be really happy with that, like what that is, because you're not going to do any more movies, you know, is the thing. If you're only going to do 10 and this is your 10th one, or even if this movie's really good, you're not going to do any more after it. So it's got to be something that you really wanted to say and put out there. So if it's something you were just kind of like, yeah, this is cool, fun, whatever, but it's like, it's got to be like something that it sort of has to get everything that's on his chest, everything that's left on his chest. It's sort of got the, you know, any other creative sort of stuff that he has to get off his chest, it all sort of has to come off in that movie, basically. He might be able to do a certain amount of creativity in a book or some shit that he writes afterwards. But as far as his movie juices go, Quentin Tarantino's movie juices, now available in 1 litre form, you know, it's got to do all of that. Because you think like, oh, I didn't do that and that thing, but I could do this. And you're like, oh, yeah, I've got 2 more movies to go. And it's like, but no, this is it. Like, so whatever it is, it's got to tick all of his boxes in terms of keeping him happy. So that's probably why he's sort of taken a step back, going, no, it's not hitting all those boxes. Maybe it hit 5 out of 10 boxes. Maybe it hit 7 or 8 out of 10, but it's not hitting all 10 out of 10. And so, yeah, he's back to the drawing board. And there's a lot of movies that he said he might do and never actually done, but he never got that close. He never got like close to like starting production on them and then going, you know what, cancel. Like, and actually cancel, you know. Hateful Eight, he just sort of paused on for a minute, really. Like, is all he ultimately really did. He said he wasn't going to do it, but really, he changed his mind so quickly, though. Whereas, and I forget what the turnaround time on that is as well, because that's another point of comparison, is like, well, what was the length of time between when he said he wasn't going to do Hateful Eight anymore, and then when he decided he would still do it? I feel like it was very quick. And so, this movie, though, it's like, it's been a minute. Was it like last week or something that he said that like he's not going to do the movie critic, and it's okay. I feel like if we get to like the end of this, say, month, you know, or even the end of this month, you know, if we get to the end of this month, or, you know, definitely if we get to the end of next month and he hasn't changed his mind, I don't think that movie's going to happen. Like that movie critic movie, that's gone, you know, unless he sort of, you know, because he turned around pretty quickly on Hateful Eight. I think he did want to do that movie though, and it was just, he didn't like people, he didn't like people leaking the stuff out, the information of the script or the people reading lines, that sort of thing. Whereas with that movie, the movie critic, I think he was sort of trying to put it together and trying to figure it out, and ultimately was like, you know what, I'll just step away. No, it's not, it's not, it's sort of, you know, it's running out of steam, or it's sort of, he kept writing, and it sort of, it didn't go off in a direction that he wanted. So we shall see. Well, that was pretty good. I think that's enough ranting about movies for now. I just talked for like an hour and 15 minutes non-stop. I need to have a break, have a Kit Kat, you know, as they say in maximum security prisons in Russia. That's what they say, have a Kit Kat, you know, because what else can you do, you know? But